She hit the snow before she heard the door slam. Not a stumble, not a trip. A push. 2 hands between her shoulder blades, full force. The kind that understands exactly what it's doing. And then the frozen steps rushing up to meet her, and her knees taking the impact and the cold coming through her uniform instantly. Shockingly, like the ground itself was joining in. Her bag landed 3 feet to her left. Her coat was still inside, on the hook by the kitchen, because Diane Mercer had not given her 30 seconds to get it. "Don't come back," Diane said from the doorway. "Don't you dare come back here." The door closed. The porch light stayed on for exactly 5 seconds, and then went off too. Rosa Vega was 27 years old, 6 months pregnant, and sitting in the snow outside 14 Alderton Close at 9:40 on a Thursday night in February with no coat, no phone. She had left it charging in the kitchen. She remembered now with a specific and terrible clarity, and $43 in her uniform pocket. The temperature was 11 degrees. She knew this because the Mercers had a temperature display on their porch, and she had noted it an hour ago when she carried the dry cleaning in, and she had thought, absently, that it was cold enough to be careful. She had not planned on being outside in it. She sat very still for a moment, not from shock, from the specific discipline of a woman who has learned, across a life that required it, to assess before she reacts. She took stock, knees stinging but not broken. The baby had not taken the impact. She had twisted as she fell, some instinct older than thought. She was cold but not yet dangerously cold. She needed to move. She needed to move right now. She got to her feet, picked up the bag, started down the front path toward the street. The light came on. Not the Mercer's light. The house to the left. The large one that sat back from the road behind iron gates. The one that had been dark for 3 months and then had cars in the drive last week and lights in the windows last night. The front door opened before she reached the gate, and a man appeared on the top step, and he said, in a voice that was very quiet and very clear, "I saw what happened. Please come inside." If you have ever been at the exact bottom of a thing, the moment where everything that could go wrong has, and the cold is real, and the night is real, and there is nothing left to hold, stay with us. Because the man who opened that door had been watching from his window, and what he does next, and what Rosa discovers about who he is and why he was watching, will take everything you think you know about this story and turn it over completely. Subscribe right now. This one matters. Rosa Vega had worked for the Mercer household for 14 months. She had come to them through an agency, the kind that places domestic workers with vetted families in the kind of neighborhood where the houses have names and the cars have no visible price tags. The Mercers were the Mercers, Gerald, Diane, and their 2 teenage sons. And they were not cruel in the way that makes newspaper stories. They were cruel in the way that is much harder to explain, indifferent to her as a person while being entirely demanding of her as a function, capable of small humiliations delivered with complete unconsciousness. The kind of household where the help was thanked at Christmas with a gift card that was $40 less than the previous year's without acknowledgement. She had stayed because the pay was reliable, and because she was pregnant, and because reliable pay, when you are pregnant and alone, and your mother is in Guadalajara, is the kind of stability that outweighs most other considerations. The baby's father was a man named Patrick, who had been charming for 4 months and then simply absent. His number still worked. He had just stopped answering it. She had stopped calling. She was having this baby. That was the whole of the decision, arrived at alone at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning with her mother's voice on the phone from Guadalajara, saying, "Mija, whatever you decide, I am here." She had decided. She was having this baby, and she was going to figure out the rest. What had ended the Mercer job was a broken vase. Diane's grandmother's vase, an ivory thing that Rosa had dusted every Thursday for 14 months without incident, that had slipped from her hands that evening when she felt the baby move. A strong, sudden, whole-body movement that startled her, and had fallen and broken on the hardwood floor in 3 clean pieces. She had stood over it and thought, I can fix this. She had looked up the restoration services on Gerald's study computer, which she had been given access to for household management, because she wanted to show Diane before Diane saw the vase that there was a solution. Diane had seen the vase first. And then, Diane had seen the browsing history on the computer, and something about Rosa using the study computer for personal reasons. The restoration search, the open tab, had been the thing that snapped whatever had been thinning for months. And the words had been fast and specific, and not about the vase at all. And then the hands had been on Rosa's shoulders. And then Rosa had been on the steps in the snow. The man at the door was tall, mid-40s, with the stillness of someone who has made a decision and is not going to revise it. He did not introduce himself at the door. He stepped back, held it open, and waited. That was it. No performance of concern, no hovering, just the open door and the waiting, which was more dignified than anything she had encountered in 14 months with the Mercers. She went inside. The hallway was warm in the specific way of a house that has recently been heated after being empty. There was a coat on the rack by the door. He took it down and held it out without asking whether she wanted it. She put it on. It was too large and it was warm, and she pressed her hands into the pockets and felt, for the first time in 40 minutes, that she was not going to die in Diane Mercer's snow. "Sit down," he said. "I'm going to get you something hot. Is there anything you can't have?" He glanced at her stomach, the question implicit, and tactfully left unspoken beyond it. "Tea is fine," she said. "No caffeine." He nodded and went to the kitchen. She sat on a low bench in the hallway and looked at the house, clean, spare. The kind of organized space that belongs to someone who travels frequently. Books on the shelves, framed photographs, work sites, somewhere that was not Chicago. One framed certificate on the far wall she couldn't read from the hallway. He came back with tea and a plate with toast. She hadn't been asked and didn't question it, because the smell hit her and she realized she hadn't eaten since noon, and sat in the chair across from her with the posture of a man allowing himself to be assessed. "My name is Daniel Ashford," he said. "I've been back in the house for a week. I saw you come to work next door. I saw tonight." He paused. "I'm not going to ask you questions you don't want to answer, but I'd like to help if you'll let me, and I need to know what you need most urgently." She looked at him. "Phone, coat that fits. Somewhere to be tonight that isn't outside. Done, done, and done," he said. "What else?" "A plan," she said. "I always have a plan. I just lost it 20 minutes ago. We can work on that," he said. "Eat first." She ate. He sat across from her and did not make her feel observed. He looked at a book he had picked up from the side table, or appeared to, and let her have the silence. She had not had considerate silence offered to her in a long time. She registered it. His phone. When he brought it, let her call the friend she was staying with, Clara, from her previous job, who had a spare room and had already offered and would drive over right now, tonight. Just say the word. Rosa said the word. Clara said she'd be there in 20 minutes. In those 20 minutes, Rosa learned who Daniel Ashford was, the way you learn things when you are sitting in someone's house with their coat on and their tea in your hands. Not from introduction, but from the room. The certificate on the wall was a commendation from a development organization she recognized. The books were engineering texts and 3 languages of field manual. The photographs were construction sites in 3 countries. He was not famous. He was the kind of person who is known specifically by people who know what the work is. "You built those," she said, nodding toward the photographs. "My firm did," he said. "Water infrastructure. Mostly sub-Saharan Africa, some Central America." He looked at the photographs. "We've been in Nairobi for the last 5 months. I'm home for 2 weeks." She thought about the dark house for 3 months. The cars last week. "Did you see what happened tonight from your window?" she said. "Yes," he said. "I was on a call on the first floor. I saw her push you." His voice did not change in register, but something in it hardened. "I'm going to file a police report in the morning. Tonight I didn't want to make your situation more complicated when you were in the middle of it." She stared at him. "You? Why would you file a police report?" "Because she assaulted a pregnant woman and threw her into snow in 11-degree weather, and I witnessed it," he said, as though this were self-evident. "I'm not going to do nothing because it happened next door." Rosa sat with that for a moment. In 14 months with the Mercers, not one person, not the neighbors who had seen her on the path, not the grocery delivery man, not the woman from the agency who had called in December to check in, had treated what happened in that house as something they had any stake in. This man had been back for a week and was already filing a report. Clara arrived at 22 minutes past 10, took one look at Rosa and one look at Daniel Ashford's house and said to Rosa privately, in Spanish, "Keep this man's number." Rosa kept his number. The report was filed. The police visited the Mercers the next morning. Diane Mercer did not face charges. What Rosa had already learned was that the law's relationship to what happens in households is complicated. But the report existed, and the agency was notified. And the agency placed a call to Diane Mercer that Rosa was not party to, but heard about afterward from the agency coordinator, who said only, "The matter has been addressed," in the tone of someone who has said something considerably more pointed than that. Rosa moved into Clara's spare room and rebuilt from there. She had the $43, a phone, and the notebook with the specific steps. She had done harder things. She was going to be fine. Daniel Ashford texted once, the week after, wanted to check in. Not an obligation to respond. "Hope you're warm," she responded. They texted for a week, and then he called because texting is slow, and he had questions about the plan in her notebook, and she found herself explaining the whole of it. The plan, the baby, the previous job before the Mercers that had been better, the translation work she could do remotely that Clara had suggested, and that Rosa was genuinely qualified for. And he listened the way she had watched him listen in the hallway, with the complete attention of someone for whom listening is not passive. He went back to Nairobi at the end of his 2 weeks. They kept talking. Not in a way that was defined or declared, in the way of two people who find that the conversation does not run out and eventually stop pretending there's a reason it should. Her daughter was born in April. Rosa had asked Daniel 3 weeks before whether he wanted to know when it happened, framing it carefully, leaving him the exit. He had said, "I'd like to know everything, whenever you're ready to tell me." She had called him from the hospital at 2 a.m, Nairobi time, and he had answered on the second ring. "A girl," she said. "She's perfect. She's furious about being here, and she's perfect." He laughed, that far away, that clearly. "What's her name?" he said. "Lucia," she said. "After my mother's mother." "Lucia," he repeated, as though trying the sound of it. "That's a name that means something." "It means light," Rosa said. There was a quiet on the line that was not empty. He came home in June, not for work. He arranged the trip around no obligation, except the one he didn't name, but which was evident from the moment he appeared at Clara's door with a gift for Lucia that was practical and not performative. A baby carrier designed for a woman of Rosa's height. The kind of specific and useful thing that requires paying attention to a person across 3 months of conversation. He held Lucia for an hour, and she slept against his chest with the unconscious authority of a baby who has decided someone is safe, and that is that. And Rosa sat across from them and thought about the steps on the snow and the coat on the rack and the open door and the 20 minutes of considerate silence. And she thought, this is not something I planned for. Then she thought, the best things rarely are. He was in Chicago for a month that time. Then 2 months. Then the firm opened a North American office, and Daniel Ashford rearranged the architecture of his working life with the same purposeful attention he applied to everything, and by the time Lucia was walking, opinionated, fast, completely certain of her place in every room she entered. He was home more than he was away, and home was a word that had shifted its address. He asked Rosa to marry him on a November evening on the front step of the house next door to the Mercers, which was his and which was almost certainly intentional. She looked at the step. She looked at him. Here, she said. Here, he confirmed. Where I can see the door from. In case anyone needs to be let in, she said yes. They were married in the spring, in a ceremony small enough to hold only people who deserved to be in it. Clara was there. Rosa's mother had flown from Guadalajara and cried from the moment she arrived at the airport and had not stopped. Lucia wore a yellow dress and spent the ceremony attempting to redistribute the flower arrangements to locations she preferred, which required significant diplomatic management from the minister. At the reception, Rosa's mother gave a toast in Spanish that Clara translated for Daniel's half of the room, and the last thing she said was, "My daughter has always known how to assess before she reacts." She taught herself that. But this time she was smart enough to react too. Daniel looked across the room at Rosa. Rosa raised her glass. 14 months of Diane Mercer's house. 11 degrees. The steps and the snow and the $43 and the baby who was not yet born, but was already the most important decision of her life. She had lost her coat and her phone and her plan in the same 5 seconds, and she had gotten up and picked up the bag and started moving anyway. Because that was what she did, and the light had come on. Some doors open because someone inside decides to open them. Some lights come on because someone is watching and has decided that what they are watching is not something they can do nothing about. Some women pick themselves up from the snow with a baby they chose and a plan they're rebuilding and walk toward an open door and change the entire shape of their life in the 20 minutes it takes for a friend to arrive. The cold was real. The night was real. And the door was open. You only have to walk through it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that the light can come on at any moment. And subscribe, because every week we tell the stories that don't let go. And we are just getting started.